Okay, today's lesson is over 1.6 inequalities, and here you're going to see the different types of inequalities, a less than and a greater than, and when you graph those you're going to use an open circle, and then your interval notation should have a parentheses, and then the second type is when you have a less than or equal to or a greater than or equal to. Those are going to be graphed with a closed circle. And those have interval notation that have the square brackets. And in college algebra, those are the answers that we want. If you need to use a graph to help you get those answers, that's fine, but you need to make sure that you're using interval notation in order to get your final answer. All right, let's start with an example. For example 1, we've got 3x minus 6 is less than 4 minus 2x. In order to solve these, you want to isolate your x. Move the x to one side. I like to move the letter to the left side. So the plus 2x would undo that subtraction. And moving it over is going to give me 5x minus 6 is less than 4. Then I need to move the 6. That gets that x alone. And I get a 10. When I divide both sides by 5, the value 10 becomes a 2. You've got x is less than 2. That means you're going to go from negative infinity to a 2, and both of those have parentheses. This side has the parentheses because the parentheses is with the 2 because your less than is not underlined. And then infinity always has a parentheses. So there's example 1's final answer. If I go too fast, just have the sub pause the notes. Okay, number 2. On number 2, we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to watch and be super careful that we don't have to change any inequalities. So 2x plus 4 is greater than or equal to 6x plus 8. Now I like to get the letter to the left like I said a moment ago, which means I'm going to move the 6 over, and then I need to move that 4 over. And so now I've got a negative 4 that needs to be divided. And I'm careful, when I divide by a negative, I must flip my inequality from greater to less or less to greater. So I'm going to write that inequality before I forget, and then I get a negative 1. And I'm going to remember that I'm going from negative infinity to negative 1, using parentheses with that infinity. Because this is an equal to and it's underlined, I'll use a closed bracket on the negative 1. Example 3. Six is less than or equal to 2x minus 4 is less than 12. In order to isolate the x's, there's only one x involved right here. So that means that this x right here needs to stay where it is. So I need to move this 4 that is subtraction out. I do so by adding. And what I do to one piece, I'm supposed to do to all 3 pieces. They're divided up with these inequalities. So if you think about them like their inequality is an equal sign, you have to do each side of the equal sign. Let's move those dots. Alright, so I've got a 10 is less than or equal to a 2x, which is less than 16. And then if I need to get the 2 away from the x, I undo the multiplication by dividing, and I get 5 is less than or equal to x is less than 8. And my inequality with the equal to on the 5 makes that a square bracket, while on the 8, that's a parentheses. And I'm double checking to make sure you've got the correct order here. if you were to think about those on a number line, are they in the correct order? Isn't 8 larger, so it should be on the right? Okay, so just check your order real quick, make sure that that makes sense, and then you can call that a good answer. So this compound inequality was an and. It's an intersection. We're going to do an or, which is a union next. So here we have an or. That means that you're going to take 2x minus 5 less than or equal to 9, or 3x minus 4 is greater than 25, and you do these individually. Go ahead, start solving for x. It's okay that you get a decimal right here. Not everything turns out to be an integer. Fractions should not scare us. We're going to leave it as that fraction. Okay, once we have them both solved, and you have an or between them, that means that this is a union, that you put both on one graph. So that means I'm going from negative infinity to 7, and I'm going to union that with 29/3 to infinity. Make sure you agree with my symbols. Because of this underline, I was supposed to use a square bracket. And because of this not being underlined, I was supposed to use a parenthesis. So this answer looks good to me. Order makes sense. This is a 9.6. And if that's a 9.6, then 7 is smaller than 9.6. So that's good. Okay. All right, the only other thing you're going to come across are a couple of word problems. So go ahead and give them a try, reading them, trying to set them up. If you're having trouble setting them up, we'll go over them in class next time. So everybody get out your calendars and get out your books, and let's work on your homework for the remaining part of the period. Thank you.